most of my professional life as a pianist, I'm usually working on a group of pieces that are going to be a program, either a solo program or program with other people, with other instrumentalists or accompanying a singer. And it's a wonderful way to work on a program, working on contrasting and compatible pieces. Recently, a program I was going to play had to be canceled because of the time we're living in with COVID-19, which is hard on everybody. But one of my great joys has always been to read music, to play music, to learn new music, to think of a composer who wrote it. I've worked with a number of living composers, which has probably influenced also how I've worked with the dead ones. They're all wonderful. And it's 300 years of music that can be played beautifully on the piano. And of course then played with other instruments, there's more, but I'm not going to get into that, just stay with the solo music. And the piece I want to share with you today, which has been one of the things that's been feeding my spirit, is a prelude by Bach. And you know, Bach was born in 1685, he died in 1750. It's a long time ago and we still love his music. Early in his life, he wrote, I'm going to limit what I say about his music to music that's for the keyboard, which was called the clavier then, music for clavier. Clavier was a keyboard instrument that played with strings, so the keys made the strings sound. And a very special instrument at that time that still is, was the harpsichord, where the strings are plucked. Another one was the clavichord, which is a smaller instrument, rectangular in shape, the strings going this way, and a very small keyboard. A lot of variation in the size of the keyboard. Of course, there was also the wonderful organ that Bach played so magnificently. That didn't have strings, it had pipes, and that's going strong, of course, too. But the music for clavier was keyboards with strings. So piano is another clavier, although it's never been called that, and it didn't exist when Bach was living. Toward the time when he died, the piano was just the old, first clunky pianos were being made. So he wrote a lot of lovely pieces that we know, but he could only compose, as all the other composers also, in 15 of the 24 keys. And I want to spend a moment with that because it's very relevant to what we're going to hear in a little bit. There are 12 half steps on the piano, on the keyboard, and there were 12 on the harpsichord. And so there were 12 major scales, right? But 15 of those keys worked for playing or composing for the clavier. The other 9, had too many out-of-tune intervals. So I want to take just a moment to talk about tuning. When violinists or cellists tune, they're tuning to perfect fifths. And often when I teach pianists something about fifths, I say, well, think of a violin tuning. Then you're hearing a fifth. A fifth inverted is a fourth. Very similar sound. And that's bass is tuned to fourths. So that's 4 strings on a string instrument. The rest, and they're tuned to perfect fifths. No, what are called beats for out of tune. But then the rest of the tuning is up to the cellist or the violinist with his fingers and his ears. And he can make it in tune with a little tiny adjustment. So that was how they played in tune. But keyboards had many strings. The piano now has 88 keys. Many of those have 3, unisons have 3 strings, some have 2, and the lower ones have 1. That's a lot of strings to tune. And you're not tuning it as you go. You have to tune it before you play. And Bach may have tuned his own harpsichord or had other people to tune it. But they, at that time, early in his life, it was tuned to perfect fifths. And that worked for 15 keys. And Bach wrote 15 2-part inventions for one of his sons, Wilhelm Friedemann, who became also a fine composer in his generation, and sounds like, and so forth. That one of the 15 inventions. I read through them recently and found that some of the later ones are more difficult and aren't played very often, so it was fun to hear those. In 1722, by then, people had been working on the well-tempered system of tuning. I can't go into it, but you might want to look it up because it's very interesting. In that way, the fifths were tuned, but all the in-between intervals were adjusted so that we had what we take for granted now, a half-step scale with equidistant between the pitches. That's an amazing difference. And Bach and everybody else could then write in 12 major and 12 minor keys from anywhere. And I can imagine the elation, especially of some incredible musician like Bach. And I think of that as I'm playing some of these pieces from the Well-Tempered Clavier in the second book. Those are his later works. He did this twice. 20 years after he wrote the first book, he wrote the second book. That was in about 1742. He died in 1750, so these are late works. And there are 24 preludes and fugues. Meantime, of course, he was writing a cantata for every Sunday and rehearsing the choir and teaching Latin to the boys. I mean, unbelievable, like the life of 5 people at least. So what I want to play for you is the 22nd Prelude in B-flat major by Bach, and a little bit of thinking before we get there. Long piece. Prelude 21, B-flat major. I was looking at the other ones before we were recording. Sorry about that. There are 3 voices playing or singing in this piece. A top one, a middle one, and a lower one. And I want to play how the first couple of measures work. We hear the top voice singing, and then the middle voice coming in, and the bottom. But while the second voice comes in, the first voice keeps playing, and while the third voice comes in, there are 2 others playing along, making beautiful music. So we're going to hear this. And what went down is going to go up. Okay. So that's some of what you'll hear. There are other kinds of activities, and one of them you'll hear several times is when there are only 2 voices playing and one for each hand, and they're playing triplets. It's triplets. That reminds me of something we did as children, maybe they still do, where they'd link hands with another child, and then facing that child, lean back till they're pulling on each other and circle around in a little dance. And as I was learning this piece, I thought of that. It happens again. You hear them going around. So there are other things that happen, but I hope you will love this as much as I do. Bach, B-flat major prelude from the Well-Tempered Clavier.